Resonant drama series, and the series premieres on Sunday, April 6th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 Central on AMC. Check it out. They're sponsoring our show. I'm sanctified. Lord, I testify. He's right by my side. I believe His word is so clear to me. Yeah. Okay. Hello, the internet, and welcome to another episode of the Cracked Podcast. My name is Jack O'Brien. I'm the editor-in-chief of Cracked, and today we're talking about the fact that you don't know what you look like. That doesn't make sense, right? Let me put it another way. If an acquaintance from work or just a stranger you've only met a few times who just kind of knows what you look like tried to describe your face from memory to a police sketch artist, the drawing they ended up with would be more accurate than the one you would end up with if you described your face from memory to a police sketch artist. That seems impossible, right? But experiments have actually proven it. One study gave people 11 versions of the same photograph. One was just, a straightforward photograph of them, their actual face, and then 10 of them were just kind of slightly altered versions of that same photograph that were photoshopped to give them, a bigger nose or giant ears or, make them better looking, more symmetrical features. Just made them look different in various ways. And when they were asked to pick out the one that hadn't been altered, that was actually a picture of them, people were way more likely to pick one of the photographs that had been altered and less likely to pick the actual photograph of their own face, the face they see every morning in the mirror. They couldn't pick it out of a lineup. The way I was able to make sense of this was to think about the blog Photoshop disasters. If you've never seen that blog, basically it's just a collection of magazine ads where models have been photoshopped to have just bizarre, inhuman proportions that look like something out of a fever dream. Tiny little waists and arms that look like optical illusions. Because the people in charge of doing the photoshopping got fixated on one single detail and just kept thinning and making incremental corrections until they had just totally lost sight of what a normally proportioned human body actually looks like and what it takes to keep a human body upright in a world where physics exist. And I think that's sort of how we end up not knowing what we look like in the mirror, right? You think more than anyone else about your big ears or big nose or tiny squinty eyes or whatever, drives you crazy about yourself. Hopefully not those three specific things, because otherwise, holy shit, what a cruel sentence I just sprung on you guys right there. But because you're fixated on one specific feature, you end up sort of distorting your whole face, and this extends way beyond just how you look in the mirror to yourself. It goes beyond appearances even to sort of all areas of our life. Scientists have found that when it comes to determining how nice we are, how racist we are, how much willpower we have, we aren't just bad at knowing ourselves, we're worse than almost anyone else. And that is what we're talking about in today's episode. Back at the end for some footnotes.
Niggas be loving the Aya, they saying the new day that nigga be spazzing. But when Ollie turn up and be Ollie, you can't never take that nigga back to cashes. Till you could go on and make up lies. But I'm so sanctified, I don't sweat it, wipe my forehead with a handkerchief.
Alright, I'm talking with Jason Pargin, who writes on Cracked as David Wong, best-selling author of John Dies at the End, and this book is full of spiders. Hello, Jason.
Thanks for having me on, Jack.
We're also speaking with Tom Ryman, who is a columnist and editor who's making it 2 weeks in a row. I feel like a game show host. How you doing, Tom?
I'm pretty good, thanks.
So, the first thing I wanted to talk about is this thing called the mirror test, which is something that scientists use to both determine if an animal is capable of self-awareness and self-perception, and also there's a thing in developmental psychology that's called the mirror stage that people speculate is somewhere between 6 months and 18 months when a baby is able to recognize itself in the mirror. The way they do it is they put a little paint on the baby or the monkey's nose. When the monkey or baby looks at itself in the mirror, if it wipes at its nose to try and get the paint off, they're recognizing that image in that mirror as themselves. And the only animals that are able to do that are a few types of primate and I think killer whales. I don't know who's smearing paint on killer whales' noses.
Watching them try to get it off is hilarious because they don't have arms.
Right.
That was actually the point of the test at first. They didn't even realize they were testing anything. They were just like, let's see if this whale can get its paint off its nose.
Really does seem like a prank more than anything scientific, but there are all these kind of profound implications about when babies start being able to recognize that that's them in the mirror. That's also around when they start being able to store memories properly, when we kind of emerge from that fog of babyhood. And the other thing that scientists have found is that, chimpanzees and other primates and mammals will pretty much just get tired of it. They're like, oh, that's a neat trick. That's me in that shiny surface. And they move on. They get past it. But humans are like the only species that becomes kind of obsessed. If left to their own devices, they'll sit there and look in the mirror, and they become fascinated with what that image in the mirror means, connecting that image in the mirror to this sort of sense of self. And so there's a way in which that seems like a really silly thing. People looking at a mirror, you think of them as shallow, but it is this really profoundly important part of what it means to be human. And that's interesting because I think I've always had a theory that the thing that we see in the mirror, we're worse at having a sense or an objective idea of our own image than a stranger who we just met on the street 2 minutes ago. They would be able to draw a better picture of you from memory than you'd be able to draw of yourself. We look at Michael Jackson as this sort of freak show, but freaks are valuable for scientific purposes. That guy Phineas Gage got a crowbar through his brain, survived. Science wasn't interested in him when he was a mild-mannered family guy, but once he started wanting to hump everything that moves when he had this brain trauma, he became super interesting because he was this weird outlier with a broken brain who could tell us stuff that people with normal brains couldn't tell us. And I think Michael Jackson's interesting in the same way, in the sense that he looked at himself in the mirror and kept seeing a giant nose. In 1992, he looked at himself in the mirror. He looked at what the rest of us saw as this tiny bump of scar tissue above his upper lip that was freakishly small, and was like, you know what, that's still too big. We need to go smaller. So the huge gap between what he saw in the mirror and what was actually there has always been really interesting to me. So that's kind of what I wanted to make the subject of this podcast, because I think there's a sense in which we can just look at the freak as other, but I think there's more of that in most of us than we like to admit. This is called body dysmorphia disorder, and the standard definition is that it is a rare mental disorder that strikes 2 to 3% of people, and its symptoms are excessive plastic surgery. But if you think about all the people you know in the world, how many of them could afford multiple plastic surgeries and would not have the family and support system in place to tell them, Jesus Christ, stop it, man, you look terrible, you've practically shaved your nose off. Less than 2 to 3% of the people that I know would be able to afford it and would be able to get away with that before somebody intervened and told them, look, because you're a person I care about, I can't let you continue to do that. So in other words, I think that there's this hidden undercurrent of people who can't really see themselves, can't really recognize what they actually look like in the mirror, but we don't know because they would never actually go out and get plastic surgery to correct the invisible flaw that they see.
My position is that that's everyone. Because the scientific term dysmorphia, the definition is it's when a perception of your own physical faults becomes so bad that it starts to impair your everyday life. That having the perception of these phantom things that you think everyone else is staring at, or that everybody in this shopping mall is looking at this pimple on my forehead, when in reality only you care about that, I think that's universal, and I think all of society runs off of that. It's just it doesn't get recognized as the disease until you become anorexic, you become neurotic, you become afraid to leave the house, and that's when it gets a scientific label slapped on it. But to look at Michael